The woman slammed a thick folder onto the hood of my truck and pointed at the gravel road behind me. From today, this road belongs to the HOA. You don't have permission to drive here anymore. I looked past her at the old wooden sign my father had built 30 years earlier. It clearly marked the road as private property. I smiled, climbed back into my truck, and slowly drove forward. She jumped in front of the bumper, screaming into her phone, "Call the sheriff. He's stealing HOA property." Neighbors stepped outside, phones already recording. I lowered my window and quietly said, "Be careful with your next move," because lies become very expensive when they're told in public. Before I even reached my ranch gate, 2 HOA board members blocked the road with their SUVs. Karen climbed out with a fresh metal sign that read, HOA private access road. One worker dug a hole while another mixed concrete. They were planting the sign on my land. Right in front of me. I asked one simple question. "Who gave you permission to touch my property?" Karen laughed. "The board voted this morning. This road now belongs to the community. We have all the paperwork we need." She waved a few printed pages in the air but never let me read them. One of my neighbors whispered, "Don't fight them. They've done this before." I simply took out my phone, snapped a few photos, and said, "Good, keep building." Karen thought I was scared because I didn't stop them. She had no idea I wanted every second recorded. By sunset, they had installed their sign, removed my private road marker, and even emailed every homeowner saying the HOA had officially taken control of the road. That night, my phone rang nonstop. Delivery drivers couldn't reach my ranch. My cattle feed truck was turned away. One employee told me HOA volunteers were charging people money to use the road. They were collecting cash from property they didn't own. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just harassment anymore. Someone was making money from stealing my land. The next morning, Karen arrived with even bigger plans. She brought contractors, orange barriers, and workers carrying paint. They started marking parking spaces along my road for a weekend community market. She smiled at me like she had already won. "If you cooperate," she said, "we might let you use the road to reach your own house." Some neighbors actually clapped. Others looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. I looked at every face standing there, then at the security cameras hidden on my gate. Every word, every truck, every person crossing my property had already been recorded. I quietly folded a document, slipped it back into my jacket, and walked away without another word. Karen laughed so loudly the whole street heard her. "See? Even he knows the road isn't his anymore." She didn't notice that one. Older man standing across the street had turned pale the second he saw the paper in my hand. He knew exactly what it was. And he knew something the HOA board didn't. By the time their next board meeting started 3 days later, 12 sheriff's deputies were already driving toward the clubhouse. And nobody inside had any idea why. They laughed as the board meeting began. Karen stood at the front of the room, proudly showing photos of the new HOA sign and telling everyone she had recovered community property. People clapped. Then the clubhouse doors opened. 12 sheriff's deputies walked in. The room went completely silent. Karen smiled at first, thinking they had come to support her. Instead, the lead deputy asked, "Which one of you is the HOA president?" Her smile disappeared. The deputy placed a large folder on the table. "We received multiple reports of criminal trespassing, destruction of private property, fraud, and illegal collection of money." Karen quickly stood up. "There must be a mistake. That road belongs to us." The deputy calmly replied, "Then you'll have no problem showing us the recorded deed." Karen handed over the papers she had been waving around for days. The deputy looked at them for only a few seconds before pushing them back across the table. "These are meeting notes, not a property deed." I walked into the room carrying another folder. Karen rolled her eyes. "He's trying to scare us." I quietly opened the folder and placed a certified county survey on the table. Then I added the original deed signed decades earlier. The road had always been part of my ranch. It had never been sold, shared, or transferred. Every legal document proved the same thing. The room became so quiet that nobody even reached for their coffee. Karen refused to back down. "He's lying." "We voted for it." The county surveyor, who had been waiting outside, walked in after being called by the deputy. He spread a large map across the table. Every property line was clearly marked. He pointed directly at the road. "This road is 100% private property. This HOA has no legal authority here." Several board members slowly leaned back in their chairs. For the first time, they realized Karen had never shown them any real evidence. Then came the second shock. The deputy played security camera footage on a large screen. Everyone watched Karen order workers to remove my private road sign. They saw contractors digging into my land. They watched HOA volunteers collecting cash from delivery, drivers and vendors for using my road. Every excuse Karen had made over the past week disappeared in a few minutes. One board member whispered, "Karen, you told us the county approved this," another asked. "You said the lawyer checked everything." Karen couldn't answer. She looked around the room, hoping someone would defend her, but nobody spoke. The people who had cheered for her only minutes earlier now looked angry. The deputies collected copies of the fake notices Karen had ordered, the payment records from the vendors, and witness statements from neighbors. One deputy looked directly at Karen. "You are being investigated for trespassing, criminal mischief, and filing false reports." She tried to leave the room, but another deputy stopped her at the door. Outside the clubhouse, dozens of neighbors had gathered. News spread quickly. People watched as the HOA sign was loaded into a truck as evidence. The fake parking barriers were removed that same afternoon. Contractors returned the next day to repair the damaged road, entrance at the HOS expense. The HOS insurance company refused to cover Karen's actions because she had acted outside the association's legal authority. The board voted to remove her as president before the week ended. Several members resigned after admitting they had approved her plans without checking a single legal document. A month later, I received a check covering every dollar of damage to my property, every lost business expense, and the money illegally collected from drivers. The county also placed permanent legal markers along my road so there would never be another dispute. One evening, I stood beside the new entrance sign, almost identical to the one my father had built years before. A young neighbor walked over and asked, "Why didn't you stop them on the first day?" I smiled and looked down the quiet road. Because the truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs one chance to be seen. From that day on, nobody in the county questioned where that road belonged. And every time someone drove past the ranch, they remembered the meeting where 12 deputies walked in. And an HOA learned that pretending to own someone's land can cost far more than admitting the truth.